Dr. Glen Swartwout, thank you very much for joining me today. Aloha.
Aloha, happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here today. Let's jump right into it. And if I can ask you to give me the best bio of yourself.
Sure, it's that's a challenge. There's so many life is like a fractal, you can look at any part of it and go deeper, and then it all connects to all the rest. So, and then with putting that three-dimensional, four-dimensional space-time fractal into the linear structure of language and thought, that's an interesting challenge. So there's many different bios, but um, I think I have to go back to the fact that I seem to have chosen my parents wisely. Go back to childhood. I'm very grateful for my parents. Uh, I was having a challenge academically in second grade. I was like a C student. I was having a hard time focusing on the teacher. Whatever they were doing across the room wasn't all that interesting, and I was making some great pirate ship doodles on my paper and got in great trouble for that. Turns out I was becoming nearsighted, but my father was an eye doctor who was a pioneer in vision therapy. And so he put me through a program of vision therapy to develop my visual abilities, which is not just the ability to see small print, and that was part of it, stopped the progression of myopia, but also changed my life completely from being a average, below average student, not interested in school, to straight A's ever since. I never would have become a doctor, been a Ivy League high honors graduate, and all the things that I've accomplished since then. So there's a statement from the SOI Structure of Intellect Institute that says children everywhere have intelligence. And so intelligence, we've kind of been trained in academia to think, oh, it's kind of a number we must be born with. It's like this genetic thing, kind of like genetics. We think genetics are a fixed thing, and they're not. There's epigenetics that makes all the difference between a cell in the eye and a cell in the liver and a skin cell, and they have exactly the same DNA. How are they so different? Oh, different genes are turned on and turned off. Same with health and disease. Different genes are turned on and others are turned off. So from there, I got to work in high school in my father's office as a vision therapist and learn how. Actually, when I was 8 years old doing vision therapy, I helped him create activities because it was fun. It's like, oh, what if we do it this way? And that wound up being in his book. And he was, taught thousands of doctors how to help improve vision. So my career kind of started 60 years ago, I guess. But in high school, I realized, wow, this really makes a difference in people's lives, not just my own. And so I realized that's something that I could do something with potentially as a career. In fact, when I did a career test, it showed my number one potential career was architecture. And I looked at that. Let's see, I have to work underneath somebody else drawing their diagrams for 8 years. And that sounded very myopic and not very fun. Fun to imagine the structures, like, wow, creating three-dimensional structures in your mind and how that would work and visualizing it. That's the fun part. But number two was optometry. So I thought, that's interesting. Wow, my dad's an optometrist, and somehow I'm resonating with that. I really wanted to go into nutritional medicine because my life was saved as a child by our family doctor, who had done 30 years of research in nutritional medicine, all the like early hospital-based studies on vitamin A metabolism when nutrition was actually part of medicine and was cutting edge of research, not like, well, the vitamins in the vitamin store, they can't do anything, can't treat disease or whatever. And he also was a researcher with Steinmetz, who, if you know physics, he's one of the top physicists of the last century, at General Electric. That's the area in upstate New York where I grew up. So he had retired from research after 30 years, became a general practitioner, even though his knowledge was through the roof. And he didn't really refer to other doctors because he healed people. He helped them heal with natural medicine, nutrition, with energy medicine that was non-invasive to the body, electromagnetic fields. So that was really fascinating to me too. Uh, but I looked at the medical field and I said, if I try to do what he was doing, he was not part of the whole medical society. They had no idea he was there because he didn't need to refer to the specialist for disease treatment. He treated health rather than disease. Didn't use drugs unless it was essential for survival. Penicillin for an infection, but I didn't want to be an outcast. But I looked at the eye field, and I saw that my dad had a colleague who was doing cutting edge research in nutrition, and he was looked up to by his peers. They thought he was a little odd. He was different. He wasn't just giving people glasses and contact lenses, but and not even just doing exercises the way my dad's work went. But my dad would refer to our family doctor and with eye diseases and help people turn them around as well. And really wasn't interested in the disease part, more in the function part, in improving function, improving health and abilities. But then in my last year as a student doctor, I got diagnosed with glaucoma. I had high pressures in my eyes, and I had the beginnings of vision loss. And the ophthalmology professor who diagnosed me said, I know who you are. I understand, you're a top student at the top school here. And I'd been elected by 5,000 peers to be president of the International Association. So I was kind of a well-known personality. And he said, for you, if you follow the medical guidance with drugs and surgery, they only work for so long, and you're 25 years old. You're going to be blind before you're 50. I didn't really want to be blind in my 40s. And he said, I recommend that you're intelligent, you know a lot, you do the research and find out what's the underlying cause and eliminate that, treat that, and find your own cure. And thank God for that advice. And so that set me on a course to apply my interest in function and health to the treatment and reversal of disease and blinding eye diseases in particular for my own benefit. Along the way to studying everything I possibly could in alternative medicine as a doctor, including my first office was in Tokyo, Japan. So I learned from the Oriental medicine doctors over there how they're using energy medicine to treat the eye and nutrition, all those kinds of things. Came back and worked with my dad in his office. And while I was there, I was in upstate New York, and I'd go to all the seminars on alternative medicine around New England and New York and learned so much. The major breakthrough, and we were having all kinds of success with that, doing standard blood tests, tests of trace minerals in the hair and urine and whatnot, and then even computerized analysis algorithms to look at the patterns. Even if you go and have a standard medical test, the lab says, oh, everything's in the normal range. Some things are a little high or a little low, but if that one thing isn't super deviating from the norm, then we kind of ignore it in medicine. But this was a computer program back in the mid 80s that would say, yeah, but when these tests are a little on the high side, and these are a little on the low side, there's a syndrome, there's a pattern there. Like we had a teenage girl. She had vision problems that were unusual. And so we were doing, exercise therapy, vision therapy with her, but she needed something more. There's something metabolic going on, but not that reached a level of a medical diagnosis. We did those tests, found the appropriate nutritional supplements to help balance her metabolism. And the results of the computer analysis said she's at high risk of acute pancreatitis. Okay, that's not an eye disease, but it sounds serious. She's never been diagnosed with it, never had that problem. And she was a teenager, didn't want to take the supplement, so she didn't. A few months later, she has an acute episode of illness. She's in the hospital. They diagnose her with acute pancreatitis. Shocking. And the sort of the funny punchline to the story is there was a complaint by the medical doctors in the community about this optometrist who, because the mom kept asking him, why didn't any of you pick this up? You were testing her, and nobody saw that this problem was coming. Dr. Swartwout knew, and they said, Doctor who? They never heard of me. I'm an eye doctor. I don't, not in their society. And so that was, one of the few complaints I ever had in New York, all three of which were from medical doctors. One was from a psychiatrist who complained that I was practicing medicine without a medical license because I gave an article to one of his patients about light therapy, which was a new thing that was being discovered at that time for seasonal affective disorder, winter depression. This was a patient who came to me and taken her history. Oh, you're depressed, okay, and all the time, or no? Is it just in the winter? Yeah. And I get this, medication for that in the wintertime from my psychiatrist. So I had a reprint of the article right on my desk. I said, this will be interesting to you, and so the doctor didn't like interfering with his drug pushing. And the other one was because I was doing trace mineral hair analysis, and they complained to the state board, and still to this day, they actually made it where in New York State, no doctor can order trace mineral analysis of the hair. Oh, really? Yeah, no, they can't. That's illegal in New York. It's a non-invasive test. It's known, it's proven to be, accurate. You can pick, it's the best way to pick up like lead toxicity in children that affects their mental abilities. So, that was kind of funny. Now I'm practicing in Hawaii, and it's been much more open-minded here, let's say. No complaints. Never had a complaint from a patient. That's the funny part to me. But in learning how, learning at all these workshops, the big breakthrough was learning energy medicine from Europe, from Germany, European biological medicine. There was a mentor teacher from Canada who was he was the head of the board of the naturopathic school up in Toronto. He picked me as a volunteer out of the audience to show how he tests at the acupuncture points, electrodermal screening they call it in the States, to see how what my body's reacting to, how it reacts to things. And I had 14 large amalgam fillings. I had thought maybe my glaucoma is related to mercury from those fillings, but testing hair and urine, mercury didn't show up. So I thought, oh, that's weird. Why is it not showing up? I have a huge source of it there. One average filling has enough mercury if it's dispersed in a 5-acre lake where you can't eat the fish without getting poisoned. And it takes, the half-life of mercury in a filling is 20 years. So in 20 years, and I had these since childhood, so they were going on. They're probably in there for 20 years at age 30, approximately. Some of them, half of the mercury has leaked out. Where does it go? Isn't that going into the body? Are you like breathing it? It turns into vapor. Or you're swallowing it. Some is going to come out, but it wasn't coming out in my excretion tissues of urine and hair. Those are elimination tissues. So the electronic testing, the Vega test, Vol-type testing, EAV testing, goes by different names, showed that I'm a non-excreter. My body was not strong enough to eliminate the mercury. It was building up in my tissues, in my eyes, my pancreas. It stores longest in the lens of the eye. It stores to the highest levels in the thyroid gland. So when we see people with like autoimmune issues and other issues with the thyroid or cataracts or actually mercury is known as the great masquerader because wherever it is in the body, it causes symptoms. It's the most symptomatic of all the heavy metals. And it can cause any symptom of any disease, just depending on where it's located. When we diagnose a disease, it's just the name of the symptom and the location. It's iritis, it's pancreatitis. Itis just means inflammation in the pancreas. It doesn't tell you what's causing it, does it? No, it doesn't. And we learned from natural medicine, naturopathy, we want to remove the cause of the disease, not just manage. Modern medicine manages the symptoms, and it also causes other symptoms, which we call side effects. But wait a minute, symptoms show that there's disease. And we call this allopathic disease, which means allo, different, pathic disease. We're giving a different disease, a toxin, to manage the symptoms of the disease, the primary disease. And what is that? The dis-ease is the fact that the immune system, the body intelligence, the innate intelligence of the body is trying to heal that area. Inflammation is caused by what? The immune system. So we use steroids that are analogs similar to what the adrenals create to regulate inflammation and decrease immune function. There's a balance in the body between different systems, between the immune system and the natural steroids in the adrenals. Well, isn't it better if we help the body, help our adrenals recover from being burnt out so they can manage inflammation, or use natural substances called immune modulators, mostly plant-based compounds that modulate or balance the immune system, which means they reduce the inflammation, the excess inflammation that does damage of both allergy and autoimmunity, and also increase immunity against organisms, viruses, bacteria, fungi, parasites. So we get a benefit on both sides. There's side benefits instead of side effects. So that's the whole approach that I use now, that developed through this experience of healing myself. So when I found out, oh, I have to remove 14 amalgam fillings, I never liked going to the dentist. Now I know why, because they were putting toxins in my head. And so I'd have to take out 2 at a time with support for chelation and detoxification, so my body can eliminate what I'm exposed to when they drill. They have to drill with a low-speed drill to take out chunks instead of the modern high-speed drill that's great for sculpting, but creates more vapor and more small particles. They have to use a rubber dam in the mouth so you don't swallow all of that and get it stuck in your appendix, which is part of the immune system. They take out the immune system. It's vestigial. We don't need it anymore. Now we have drugs. The tonsils, the surgeons can only reach 2 of the 5 tonsils in the tonsillar ring, so we're left with some. But they'll sometimes take out the spleen, the appendix, not usually the thymus, thank goodness, but or the lymph system is part of the immune system. The bones, the marrow of the bones, is where the immune system is produced, just like the red blood cells. So what I found out was, I was actually, based on a European blood test called bioelectronics of Vinson, which actually measures the physics of the blood, the oxidation reduction potential, which is it's a measure of electrons, of antioxidant potential in the body, and the pH, which is a measure of protons, acid alkaline balance, which people have also probably heard of. Based on that test in my blood, compared to the blood of hundreds of thousands of other people in Europe that have been tested over now probably 80 years, I was at over 99% risk of actually dying of stroke in my 30s. So before I would have a chance to go blind, I would have been dead. I didn't really want to go that route either. So I was willing to go through the dental work, and all of that was not fun. But it was the second to last time at the dentist. They took out 2 more fillings. There were only 2 little ones left. I walked out of the dentist's office, and I was like shaking with energy. There's no way I could have sat down in the car and safely driven it, a block. I just couldn't control my body. I had energy I hadn't felt in decades. And I was 30 years old, or 31. And so I literally had to jog up and down the block a couple times and I go, oh, okay, now maybe I can sit and focus at, this energy and drive home, short way. Shocking. And so having saved my own life and saved my own vision, since then, I've done a lot of contemplation. When I was back as a child working with my dad, he was studying at Yale's Institute for Child Development, Gesell Institute, now separate from the university, but still there. And they had him learning how to do intelligence testing, and he did what they call a power test, where you don't just stop when you ask questions if the person answers it right, and you stop when they get one wrong. In this form of the test, you ask a couple more questions to see if maybe they get one that's harder. If they miss more than 2 in a row, then you're done with the test. Well, he tested my brothers first and then me. It was late at night, it's past my bedtime. He finally gave up at my IQ testing at 186. And so I've been
Oh,
applying
wow.
whatever intelligence I have, and that's over 30 points higher than Einstein, supposedly. Uh, but again, intelligence is something that changes. And so, anyway, I've applied whatever intelligence I have to understanding what is it we're doing wrong in modern science, modern medicine, looking at the world from the cosmos to the microcosmos of the body, because it's the same world. How does it work? The importance of energy is so underrated. We, go to medicine and, they measure some levels in our blood and they say whether, there's a problem or not. But wait a minute. How do we know that you can measure the blood and it doesn't tell you if you're alive or not? How can it miss that? Chemistry is not a question of life and death. Is not a question of a change in chemistry. It's a change in energy. We can only measure it with the EKG and EEG. Is the brain working? Is the heart working? Then we know if we're alive. And energy is shifted by consciousness, right? If I think differently, we know that half of the power of any drug is placebo or nocebo effect, whether we anticipate good or harm. That's why they have to do controlled studies to see if a drug does anything at all. Uh, and then the problem with drugs is they're toxins. We're not deficient in toxins ever. We're deficient in nutrients. Like with blinding eye diseases, we've identified vitamins and minerals that are essential because we die if we don't have them. But there's kind of, they should be called longevity vitamins, like the carotenoids that are essential for maintaining vision as we get old, right? We get macular degeneration. Uh, 1 out of 3 people over the age of 75 now has this condition. 11 million Americans. It's slated to go up to 33 million by 2050. So this is a big project we're working on now, because 100% of our clients that we work with, at whatever stage they're at, not only stop the progression of vision loss and deterioration, degeneration in the retina, but they're regaining vision. Same with glaucoma, people regaining lost visual fields. Now, what I was taught in school, all eye doctors are taught, this is irreversible. It's still in all the textbooks. For 40 years of doing this work, I've had letters from Harvard-trained retinologists saying, I've never seen this before. I've never heard of this before. This person, chose not to do eye injections or chose not to do laser surgery on the retina to stop leaking blood vessels, which does damage, but in the long run, maybe it saves some damage in some people. Same with the injections. 40% of people wind up worse than they would have without the injections, but other people, maybe it's stabilizing, but their definition of stable in the studies so they can sell the drug is if they haven't lost more than 3 lines of visual acuity, well, that's about half your visual acuity. That's half your vision, central vision. Then we'll call that stable. And then we can sell it to people saying, well, 85% of people are stabilized by this. Really? No, that's a lie. Um, so anyway, our folks are improving. The longest it's ever taken just recently is a client with macular degeneration, vision loss, and uh, it was 3 years. She stuck with it, God bless her, for 3 years without seeing clinical improvement in her vision from her eye doctor's reports. And then finally, it's improving. Why would it take so long? Because she has head to toe incredible amounts of trauma, scar tissue from you name it, being scalped and shooting herself in the foot with a shotgun, and the lead pellets that are in there. The surgeons say, we can't go near those. You could die, if we move it just wrong. You got to live with it. So she's living with a source like I was of mercury toxicity. She's got lead toxicity. We can't get the lead out except little by little. And it took 3 years to get enough out to where at that point where the vision started improving, she also noticed all of her scar tissue started becoming more flexible and softer and more comfortable. It's like her body is finally healing. We call this accelerated self-healing, even when it takes 3 years. But the natural history of it is it's expected only to get worse. As we get older, we lose 30% of our circulation in 40 years of aging. But now we have energy medicine therapies. We have a mat you can lie on 15 minutes twice a day that brings back the circulation by 30%, and the effects last for a day, and you do that the next day and the next day, and things heal that otherwise are just chronic or degenerative conditions. I had a woman who had a mitral valve prolapse here on the island, and I worked with her for a number of years, just on and off. Here's the program you need. Here's what your body responds to right now from nature. Take these for a while. Um, and she went to her car. She hadn't even talked to me about her heart, but she called me one day. She was so excited. She said, "I'm so happy. I don't have to take antibiotics when I see the dentist this time." Oh, really? Why? What they say? So, well, because my cardiologist just says I don't have a mitral valve prolapse anymore, and I've had it for 30 years. And he's a Harvard trained cardiologist. And he told me if he hadn't been my doctor 30 years ago and remembers listening to my heart and following me for 30 years, he would have said, there's no question, absolutely, you're misdiagnosed. Whoever that doctor was, they misdiagnosed you, because that's what we learn. That's what is the prognosis? The prognosis is based on watching people who are doing what we tell them to do as doctors, right? So if what we're telling to do is, well, there's no treatment, or if it gets bad enough, we'll use some drugs, some surgery to modify the symptoms, but not remove the cause. Taking out a cataract doesn't remove the heavy metals that cause the cataract, or whatever, or sugar causes a third of cataracts, doesn't remove the source of sugar dysregulation. Yeah, so it's been just exciting to see what can the body heal. My conclusion is, well, what
Introduction here. Wow, I'm really impressed with what you just said. What advice would you give a younger person starting out in their career and profession? I'm asking this because I can see you had quite an intensive journey, and clearly from the very young age you've been inspired to pursue your dreams. What would you say it's important for the younger generation? Normally
yeah,
what we do, we are being pushed through the school system
yeah.
and being told to be good at different subjects, follow the rules, be on time, do homework,
Hmm. And
study exams, pass the exams, and then we exit the school system and we left somewhere up in the air without knowing really what we want to do with our life, because we're still
absolutely.
young and our brain develops. What's
I
your
would,
what's your call on this?
yeah, I would share the exact words my father gave me when I joined his practice at like age 27 or so, just out of school, got my license. I'd practiced in Tokyo for a couple of years doing research on vision improvement there. But he said, you've completed your studies, you've passed the test, the state has given you a license which says you know enough to get started. It doesn't mean you know everything. And he said, but if you listen to your patients, they will teach you the rest. So patients, clients, whoever you're working with, the coworkers and the people that you serve, listen to them. They're closest to the problem. They won't have the professional language. If you're a doctor, they're not going to use the Latin terms, right? They're not going to have the professional language to describe it, but they will describe exactly what's going on. Uh, I remember, it brings to mind a young man who came to me with eyes that were going different directions, a severe autoimmune condition where the muscles of the eyes swell. There's lots of immune cells in there trying to clean something out. The medical system couldn't help him. Nobody knew, why. Well, it's autoimmune. That's all we know. And of course, they could use some kind of chemotherapy type drugs to kill the immune system. But isn't the immune system's intelligent? It's more intelligent than we are. It's trying to do something. There's something there that doesn't belong. So I thought, well, I took a in-depth case history. I listened to him for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. His story. Well, when did this start? Oh, I was working at this company, a construction company. Yeah, and what was your job? What were you doing? Oh, well, we had this office that was in a building that they were just building that wasn't finished, and we were working on blueprints, and we lay them on the floor, on like the subflooring, the plywood, and that's when the problems started in my sinuses. I was breathing and touching with my hands this like toxic material from the construction work, and and I thought, well, wow. So I did a little research. Okay, there's like formaldehyde and similar compounds in there. Is there some way maybe to test for that? And I did some calling around, and I got a hold of a doctor who was smarter than me, an MD, PhD, who had a lab that could test for antibodies to these kinds of chemicals that are in those building materials. And, sure enough, okay, it came back. Yeah, he's he's high in those antibodies. So now what are the nutritional compounds that can help the body to detoxify those compounds, and helping him with that? But nobody else in the medical community wanted to get anywhere near identifying the cause of disease, because then, this is a powerful company. You don't want to get on their bad side. That's going to mess with your career. And so I would say, for me personally, you have to make that choice. What's going to be the most important? How this is for your career, for money and power, or how this is for the person that you're actually there serving. To me, my primary contract is with the person sitting in front of me, that living human being who has a problem. I'm here to help figure out if I can help them somehow, however I can help them. So, I ordered that blood test for the autoimmune immunity that confirmed the cause. And just before the state ruled that optometrists, it doesn't say in your license that you can order lab tests, and the medical doctors are complaining about you. So optometrists can no longer order lab tests in New York. Oh, it's a gray area. Well, I've trained as a doctor. Really? I can't find out what's going on in that way. So to me, it's all about the question, what is it that you really love? What is your purpose? Are you going to love power? Like most people in most professions, they want the raise. They want that moving ahead in the social construct, in the company. Or is it the power of love that you're here for? Because in the end, we all die. We all have an immortal body that is living, I call it an in-body experience we're having. And I've had out-of-body experiences that were amazing and profound, where I met angels and they told me prophetic things about my future that came true. Who I was going to marry, their name, and what state they're from 2 years before, when I was in Tokyo with my first wife. And then another one back when I was in school, 20 years before 9/11, I was looking at the Twin Towers from a bird sanctuary on Long Island, and that's the only part of Manhattan you could see, the tops of those two towers. And I went out of body and met this angel that, in retrospect, an angel, looked like a human, right? A very well-dressed, dapper human. Told me, remember, when you can no longer see those from here, you better, be on your game, because that's when things really are going to start to happen. 20 years to the month, maybe the day, I don't know the exact date, but 20 years before 9/11 happened. So when 9/11 happened, one morning here, patient walked in in the front door and said, "Oh, turn on the TV." he was one of the wealthiest men on the island who was dying, and his acupuncturist here in town was doing great work, even with energy medicine instruments, in addition to conventional acupuncture, herbs, moxibustion. Couldn't get his pulses to come up. His circulation was just fading. And without circulation, we can't go very far. So he referred him to see what I could do, because he knew I do some different things. And he was the most complex case I ever saw. He needed like 20 different supplements and it was mostly material stuff. It's like, we need to get the chemistry in there to make things happen in your body. We could give you some energy, but you don't have energy to respond to energy. We got to get your energy systems working again. And in 1 month, his pulses started responding. The unfortunate ending of that story, after a number of months of improvement, his medical doctor and his wife convinced him to go on a different protocol for helping his memory. And it was a drug. And the drug protocol said, you can't take anything else. No supplements, no herbs. No. Our studies are only with this alone. You can't mix it with anything else. And in that month going off it, he went blind. All of his brothers were already blind from glaucoma. He wasn't, but in 1 month on that protocol, lost his vision. So very sad.
Terrible story. Awful. What is a habit that had a positive impact on your life, and how did you develop it?
That's a great question. I guess there's the first thing that concretely comes to mind is contemplation. Um, it's a form of prayer. What is prayer? It's thought that extends to the heavens, transcends space and time. We can contemplate the past, we can contemplate the future. And my conclusion from all the studies and work that we do is we can affect the past and the future. We can heal the past. I mentioned epigenetics in the beginning, how genes are turned on or turned off to make one cell different than another, or a disease or a healthy cell different from each other. And those disease genes being turned on, it comes from environmental stresses, and it can be from our ancestors, and that pattern of stress readiness for that stressor that the ancestor experienced is still happening and causing propensity for disease generations down the line. Like Native Americans say, 7 generations are affected, before and after. Uh, it really first came home to me clearly with working with a woman who had unusual skin symptoms, and she said, "Yeah, but my mom had this same symptom, but even worse. Her whole life, she had this weird skin problem. Never heard of anybody else having it." And we worked with her for a number of months. She had been out of touch with her mother for over 30 years. They didn't call, they didn't write, they lived 3,000 miles apart. And then she gets out of the blue, as her skin symptoms have just cleared, she gets a call from her mother. Hey, before she can say anything about what's happening with the daughter, who is like in her 60s, the mom says, "You'll never guess what's happening. You know that skin problem that I always had? It's finally going away." Well, the mother didn't do anything except have the same antenna, same DNA, which are transdimensional, transtemporal, transspatial antenna for biocommunication. So they were still in communication at a genetic level, at a biological, biophysical level. So there was like, wow, really? That's what they talk about in homeopathy with miasms, that, you can treat one person, it affects generations both ways. It's real. When those kind of realizations kind of get your attention to where, okay, well, what can I do to heal my past? What are the diseases that run in my family? Oh, glaucoma runs in the family. Yeah, and that's what I had. But now I was supposed to be blind in my 40s if I lived past my 30s. I'm now in my upper 60s and I still have all my vision. So we can change the past, how we relate to it, how it affects us. I can't say that the past itself objectively changed. There's no objectivity there. We can't go and measure it. But our relationship to it and how it affects us, the meaning of the signals in our environment and in our body, we can change the meaning of those. And the hierarchy of change is from consciousness to energy. When we think differently, if you imagine, if you contemplate hitting a tennis ball, if you have an EMG, electromyograph, on the muscles of the shoulder, you can not tell me when you visualize it, but the EMG can tell me when you visualized it, because there's a subtle movement. The energy moves. Thought is movement. They've measured from the visual cortex, when we visualize light, when we contemplate light, they can measure a little bit of light. They have a scintillation counter in a totally dark room. You can measure light coming off of the brain. How do we have contemplated so many things for so long to figure out some of the things I've figured out, like the question of how do we see? Biologists are still saying that the sky is inside the skull. We see that out there, right? They're saying, well, that's really in here. No, it's not. I see where it is. Where I see it passes the statistical test called the grandmother test. Ask grandma. She'll tell you the right answer. Doesn't need numbers. But how does this electrical signal in the visual cortex, how does it get projected out there? We know from vision science, we can measure we don't always project it where things really are. People can project things closer or further. If you project the baseball closer to you than it really is, you're going to swing early and miss it. And if you project it further away, you're going to swing late and miss it. And that correlates with whether the eyes are what we call ESO or EXO, whether they tend to turn in or out, which correlates with acid alkaline balance and other things. So we know from vision perception studies the mathematics of the shape of how we project the world compared to where it really is called a horopter, the Nonius horopter. fun word. You can look it up. Uh, the mathematics of that say it's centered mathematically on a spot, on an area that they call an eye. They call it the cyclopean eye because there's one. It's projected from one eye, but it's not a physical, mechanical, material, biological, chemical eye. It's located between the two eyes, but closer to the dominant eye. And when we do vision therapy to get the two eyes working better together, it moves closer to the center of the body. And it's a little bit behind the biological eyes. That's not an anatomical location, except in the spirit body it is. It's the major center, energy center of the spirit body, just like there's a heart center in the spirit body that's not on the heart physically is on the left side of the body, but this center of the spirit body that corresponds to the heart is on the right, slightly on the right side of the body. And they've measured the location of it. And when people are shifting into different disease patterns, it moves off center in different directions. How interesting. You know, the heart and the eye are the only two organs that are in Oriental medicine, all of the meridians connect directly to. They're major energy centers, major communication centers. In studies, okay, so my theory just recently, contemplating in the last month, it's like, aha, I figured something out. Why? By using my own mind. The power of your mind is incredible. Where do breakthroughs in science come from? The eureka moment of, you know, putting your body in a bathtub and seeing the water level go up. I can measure the volume of a body by immersing it in water and measure the displacement. It's like, that's where the word eureka comes from. That was the exclamation. I can measure that. So real breakthroughs in science are breakthroughs in consciousness, breakthroughs in thought and mind. And just thinking is very, very powerful. But thinking with an open mind, not thinking, well, I learned it in school, therefore it's true. No, the breakthrough is going to transform the context, the meaning of that. It's going to put it in a wider context. So like the visual cortex is like a screen, right, that we're projecting electronically from the physical eyes onto this physical screen. But we have a spirit that's in there, in the cell membranes of the brain tissue. That spirit is what's seeing it. When we have an out of body experience, it's seeing, you know, the person whose heart is flatlined is seeing their body from the upper corner of the room. Usually, they're seeing, and they're not seeing the way we do with our biological eyes, 180 degrees, and you know, a little less than that vertically because the eyebrow and cheek. They're seeing 360 degrees around, above, below. They're seeing in all directions. The spirit's not limited by the biological body suit when it's out of body. Fascinating. So it's being projected through this location called the cyclopean eye out into space, and that is, we see it out there. The minerals of the spirit body, I come to the conclusion from modern alchemy research, which now has patents, it's real, but it's a non-ordinary state of matter of about a dozen transition minerals that we, copper, gold, silver, rhodium, iridium. There was a study on these mineral forms, which the hard physicists we can talk to them about Bose-Einstein condensates. The condensate is a form of a state of matter, like solid, liquid, gas, plasma, but it's a lower energy state where all the atoms are in the same quantum state and they're no longer acting as separate atoms, they're acting as a field. There could be millions of them in a spirit body. There are. Who knows? We don't know how many. That'd be a fun calculation to do about how many. Because we know that these atoms are in that transition mineral group. We know that the study of brain tissue from a pig brain was 5% dry weight rhodium and iridium in this condensate-like state, this low energy state that acts as a field. And because it's a field, it could be in the same location as ordinary matter. The spirit body is real matter, but in a non-ordinary state that can take up position without displacing the ordinary matter. It's in the body, but not of it. It's low temperature, low energy, but it's not thermally linked to the body. It's not taking up the heat of the body. It's cool. It's very cool. Mm-hmm. And so one of the properties of these condensate minerals is bilocation. They can, this field is about, according to the patent work, 5/9 of the mass, so a little more than half the mass, is localized, is in that field, that local field. You can weigh it. But 4/9 of what would be the gold, the iridium, rhodium, is not here now. It's somewhere else or some other time. It's projected into space time, like thought does, and that's how thought does that. That's how we think about the past. That's how we think about the future. The future, we still have future. I visualize like a plane. We have choices. We can apply our will to, to go to the right or go to the left, to say yes or say no. So that's the navigational quality of moving into the future. The present is this point in space time where we're located, and the past is linear. So we've got a 0-dimensional now, we've got a 1-dimensional past, and a 2-dimensional future. We add the 2 and the 0 and the 1, we get 3, just like space is 3-dimensional. And space, I think, comes from, it's tied to electromagnetism. The right-hand rule of electromagnetism, you've got motion, you've got electricity, and the magnetic field at 90-degree angles from each other. That defines three-dimensional space. These all have implications for healing and for life and for navigating our life, making choices.
Let me ask you another question then. What's a piece of advice you've received in your life that stuck with you, and why?
I'm trying to think like who, but and the first answer that comes is from the advice from my own body. I learned how with the electroacupuncture, German diagnostic electroacupuncture techniques, how to ask my body what's out of balance. In other words, what is energy trying to do but not able to? What is it working too hard at, and not achieving the result in a balanced way? We call it inflammation or degeneration. And then bringing in all the possible information sources, energy sources, material sources from nature, herbs, nutrients, thought forms, affirmations, essences, whatever it might be, to see what happens if I bring this energy or thought or material into my body field, which is this unified field of the spirit. How does that activity change? And that's how that technique works, is to balance, to create coherence in the field. When the field is coherent, so the advice is what I learned from European biological medicine of ask the body what brings about coherence, even before you take the pill, even before you do the therapy. Just bringing it into the field mentally or physically or energetically, that stimulus creates a response. It's like a lie detector test, actually, but we do it at acupuncture points when we're doing it on the body. And now we have ways to do it at a distance mentally as a medical empath. Is how I work now primarily, but we also have several technical methods through the internet or non-local without the internet connection, or through voice frequencies, many ways to read the body's responses like a lie detector test and say, okay, this is what your body's reacting to. Now, what quiets that reaction to where now there is space for contemplation? You're here now. You have everything you need. It's an active state. Your body's always healing the best it can with what it has, but we've identified what it needs in order to be more efficient. And then the response we call accelerated self-healing. So yeah, to not presume that my mind knows. The mind, they say, can process about 100 bits of information per second. Well, the body, mind, spirit, the whole complex, and really it's the spirit that's doing the bulk of that processing, is 1,000,000 times more than that. So if we want good advice, we've got to get out of our own heads, our own minds, and seek guidance from the spiritual realm. And then a secondary corollary is question all spirits. Question all spirits. If I have a thought that's I don't like. It's like I'm walking down the sidewalk and I have some string of words, some voice comes into my head about a judgment of some other person or something. It's like, whoa, I'm going to test. I'm going to test that thought. Test all spirits. That's a thought is a thing. It's a spirit. It's an energy form, a waveform. It's like, oh, use the only patented muscle test in the world, the Omura O-ring test, and say, is that me? No, that's not me. Okay, well that helps. I don't have to buy into it if it's not me. Is that a demon? Is that my mother's voice? Is that what is that thought form? Where is it coming from? And then I know what to do with it.
Great. Thank you for sharing this. All right, let's move to the final question. And this would be aimed at the younger generation. What would be your final words of wisdom you would want to pass on, specifically to younger people?
Choose to go for the power of love rather than the love of power. Love of power, power gets its power, it's a destructive force. It gets its power from destroying what is already created, and what is good is created by the power of love. So once the love of power has destroyed its source, which came from love, then there's no more power. So it's self-limiting by definition. Just like, a disease, it's destructive. Well, it can only destruct so far and then you're dead. And so a disease can never have immortal life. It's a demon, or our thought about it, our diagnosis of it is actually a demon. It's a thought form that we give our life energy to. That's the energy we need in order to heal what's causing the feeding of that demon. So whereas the power of love is infinite. If you look at the science of sensation of touch, of energy of touch, anger is a punch. Love is just doesn't end. The waveform of love is infinite. It's harmonic. It's coherent. And so that's the power of construction, the power of creation, which is where we all come from. So we all have that power within us. And to be centered there, to be heart-centered, the mind can go many ways. And that's where, getting ourselves centered to where we can contemplate from a heart-centered place is super powerful. You can create anything in the long run because you can sustain that power of love.
Dr. Glenn, I wanted to thank you so much, really, for your time. You've shared so many stories, experiences. It's truly wonderful to have been able to talk to you and enter your thought process and be able to step inside your head for a little bit, even for a short period of time, to get your wisdom and knowledge and experience throughout your life that you've accumulated. Very insightful. Great. So thank you so much again.